This is part 2 of the Jakarta Standard Tag Library tutorial, where we will look at the next set of version 1.2 JSTL tags, since that is the version that matches Jakarta JEE 8 and can be run on Tomcat 9 with OpenJDK 11. And of course, it's the technology we use in our example code. Once again, the actual Jakarta JSTL 2 specification that will guide us will be for version 2.0, which is actually part of the next major Jakarta JEE 9 release. In the previous tutorial, we started working with the JSTL 1.2 tags. We looked at date formatting in our charity registration application. We also replaced embedded Java with the core tags, such as the loops, conditionals, and iteration in our sample registration application. And we also looked at the official JSTL 2.0 specification and compared it to the Oracle JSTL 1.2 documentation. And then we also looked into the relationship between the JSTL 1.2 tags and Tomcat 9. In part 2, we will look at internationalization using the formatting tag library, and we'll also take a look at the database tag library. We look at the Internationalization Tags library documentation first, and we learn how to use them by adding an address database to our charity registration application. And we then introduce date formatting and local language formatting in our country-specific charity registration address database. Next up, we'll look at the database SQL tag library and why its use is discouraged. We will review the SQL tag library actions in the documentation so that you will be able to maintain or migrate legacy code this way. And now we are going to go over to our course documentation and select using the JSTL 1.2 part 2. And here is the overview in the documentation. So we'll start by looking at the Internationalization Tag Library. First, there is the format message, and it's got links to the actual documentation. And here it shows you how to internationalize your message or your greeting. And in the next link, it shows you the full syntax of your internationalization. After the format message, there is the formatting set locale with the links to the documentation, which resolves your localized message from a resource bundle, and then it displays it inline or saves it to a variable. And you use the key value to resolve which one to display. Then there is the course linked to the bundle, and this is where you store all the text and the key values of special locations. And here is the link how to set your bundle. Then there is formatting your local or your selected time zone and setting the time zone. There is a link to formatting numbers for a specific locale, as well as formatting dates. Now, I strongly encourage self-study of all these official documentation links provided here. And in the next section, we will look at our expanded registration example, where we use localize messages to display a charity address book. So firstly, we will expand the web XML and we'll add a context initialization parameter for our charity address book messages. And this will set up the resources bundle that will be used to store the localized messages. Now, when we use Tomcat 9, this is where it tries and pick up the file of the resource bundle, and if it doesn't find that, it looks for a file that is named this. And then finally, if it doesn't find any of these files, it goes back to the default locale setup in the server and the browser, which is US English in my case. Now we will use Maven, and because of that, we will place our resources bundle in the source main resources directory, and we have the English US properties file. Maven will then copy it to the correct location. Then we add a servlet, and as usual, we update our index.jsp with the new redirect, and we add a new internationalization tag lib directory in our base JSP fragment file. We also add a new JSP to list the registered addresses. And now it's time to go over to Eclipse and look at our example. So first we'll look at the web.xml, and we include a localized context, and we specify the name of our localized message bundle as charity address book messages. And as we've seen in the documentation, it's gonna look first for a language and region properties file, then for just a language file, and then thirdly, it will fall back to the default locale. And because we use Maven and we package this as a web application archive, our location of our language specific properties files will be under source main resources. We have the English US with the title of the page name, some other specific language values. Then we have the English South African properties files, and we have some kind of localized English slang there. And we also have something totally different, which is the Afrikaans language file. And now to the meat of our application, which is the new charity registration address list servlet. We have the URL mapping, and as we can see here, we create a sorted set, specifically a tree set of an in-memory address database, and we store 3 new address objects into this in-memory database. This is what our new address object looks like. We have the ID, the name, phone number, web URL, registration day, and the date of the address creation. And then we have our standard do get, and first we set up the resources mapping to our properties files. We specify the directory, and then we add it to our default registration servlet. And here we request the current locale, we request the current country and the current language. And for debugging purposes, we output it to the console. And here is the logic we will follow. So first, if the language is Afrikaans, it will set it to Afrikaans South Africa. Else, if the country is South Africa, it would set it to English South Africa. If neither of these are set, it's going to default to US English. And here we set the locale, which has either been created or defaulted. And we get our address collection, and then we forward to our list registration address JSP. This is our address JSP page. We have the style sheets up here, and first we check if there are any addresses, and then finally we do a row value where we do a for each on each of the address values, and we display the address, phone, registration date, and creation date. Then of course we've updated our redirect to go directly to our charity registration list servlet. We've included all the necessary imports in our base JSP fragment file, but we also add some here because Eclipse doesn't have the capability to find them in another file. And now we are ready to run our application and demonstrate. First we run a full Maven clean install. Then we clean up our Tomcat server. And finally we clean all our projects. And we select charity registration, run on server. And here is the output of our address book. We can see that we are using the English US. Let's try and play around with the browser localization settings. We will search for language, and we see we have our preferred languages, and I've previously set up the English South Africa and the Afrikaans. So let's change it to English South Africa. And we go back to our address book, refresh, and we see we've got a little bit of different English. Let's go back, and we select Afrikaans, and back to our address book, and refresh. And here we have the full Afrikaans language address book display. And that concludes this tutorial. I will see you in the next one.